It started on a quiet morning, a morning like any other, in a life that had seemed so predictable. My daughter, Emily, had asked for a DNA test. I'd been hesitant at first, but I'd agreed, thinking it was just a phase. Maybe she had some curiosity about her heritage or wanted to learn more about her family background. She had always been the type to ask questions, to dig deeper, to find answers. I admired that in her. The test results came in an envelope, a small, inconspicuous thing that I hardly gave a second thought to. But that afternoon, as I opened it while sitting in my favorite chair, one that had been with me for years, I felt a small shiver down my spine. The paper inside was cold to the touch, the print so clean it felt almost sterile. I scanned the results quickly, expecting to see a list of percentages, regions, and origins. But what I saw instead made my heart stop. It wasn't the names of ancestors or some long-lost connection to royalty that caught my eye. No, it was the small section at the bottom, the one about parentage. The DNA test had confirmed Emily's paternity, and then there was a name I hadn't expected. It wasn't my husband's. It was someone else's. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, the words on the paper blurring together. My mind tried to make sense of it, but it couldn't. I remember the sound of the clock ticking in the hallway, each tick louder and louder, like it was echoing through the silence of my own confusion. My hand trembled as I held the paper, my breath shallow. I could feel my pulse in my temples, the weight of the paper heavier than any document I had ever held in my life. I didn't even have to look at the name more than once. I knew who it was. My husband's brother, my brother-in-law, the one person I had trusted the most, the one person who had been there for us through thick and thin, the one person who had been so close to our family that I had never questioned his place in our lives. And now, it seemed he had taken something that didn't belong to him. My mind raced. Was this a mistake? Could the test have been wrong? I ran through every possibility, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. It wasn't a mistake. This was the truth. I walked into the kitchen, the test results still in my hand. I couldn't bring myself to show them to my husband just yet. I wasn't ready. The words felt like they were burning in my palm, and the thought of speaking them aloud made my throat tighten. I tried to act normal. I told myself I would just put it away for a while, think things through, maybe find a way to convince myself that this was all some sick misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew there was no turning back. The truth had already been revealed, and there was no undoing what had been done. My thoughts drifted back to Emily, sitting in the other room, probably thinking she'd done something trivial. But for me, it was anything but trivial. It was a devastating blow to everything I had built my life around. My marriage, my family, everything. All of it now felt like it was built on a lie. I couldn't help but think about the years I had spent with my husband, the trust, the love, the foundation we had built together. And then I thought about his brother, the man I had trusted with my deepest secrets, the man who had always been so kind to me. How could this happen? How could he do this to me? To us? I heard a noise from the hallway, the sound of footsteps approaching. My husband's voice called out to me, his voice warm and familiar, unaware of the storm that was brewing inside of me. I tucked the test results into my pocket and forced a smile, but inside, my world was breaking apart. The sound of my husband's footsteps grew louder as he entered the room. His face, tired from a long day of work, softened as he saw me standing by the kitchen counter, holding a mug of coffee I hadn't even touched. He gave me that smile, the one I had grown so used to over the years. It was comforting, almost routine. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. He had no idea. I looked at him, my thoughts a tangled mess, my chest tightening with every breath I took. How was I supposed to act? How could I confront him with something so impossible? I couldn't even say the words. The truth felt like a weight too heavy for me to carry alone. I swallowed hard, trying to gather my thoughts, but nothing came out. I simply nodded, forcing a smile in return. I don't think he believed it for a second, but he didn't press. Instead, he went on about his day, about the bills we needed to pay, about the things we had planned for the weekend. And I listened, nodding occasionally, but inside, all I could hear was the deafening silence that had settled between us. "Are you sure you're all right?" he asked again, walking closer to me, his eyes searching mine for any hint of what was really going on. I nodded again, this time with more force, hoping he would drop it. But he didn't. I could see the concern in his eyes, the way his brow furrowed as he reached out to touch my arm. And for a moment, I almost let myself believe that maybe this was just a bad dream. Maybe I was overthinking things. But then, I remembered the DNA test, the cold, hard truth that stared back at me from that paper. I pulled away from his touch, the movement instinctive. "I just need some time, that's all," I muttered. He didn't push any further, but I saw the look of confusion on his face. It was clear he didn't understand why I was acting this way, why I was suddenly so distant, and I couldn't bring myself to explain it. Not yet. Later that night, as we sat down to dinner, I could feel the weight of the secret pressing down on me. Emily sat quietly, pushing her food around on her plate, and my husband chatted about something trivial, but all I could think about was the test. The betrayal, the man who had violated the trust that had held our family together for so long. My mind kept racing back to the day I'd met my brother-in-law, to the years we'd spent as a family, to the moments when I had trusted him like a second brother. I thought about the vacations we'd taken together, the times he'd been there for me when my husband was too busy with work. And then, I thought about Emily, my sweet, innocent daughter. She was just a child in all of this, caught in the middle of something she didn't even know. She had no idea that the world she thought she understood was about to shatter. That night, after dinner, Emily went to bed early, like she always did. My husband and I sat in silence, the weight of our unspoken words hanging heavily in the air. He was watching TV, but I couldn't focus on anything other than the knowledge that, in the morning, I would have to face the truth. How could I look him in the eye? How could I confront him with what I knew? Finally, after what felt like hours of quiet, I stood up. My legs felt like jelly beneath me as I walked to the kitchen. I needed to do something, anything to calm the chaos in my mind. I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and took a long, steady sip. The coldness of it didn't help. The knot in my stomach remained tight, unyielding. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting my husband to be standing there, asking me what was wrong. But he wasn't. He was still on the couch, his attention fully absorbed in the television. I knew then that I had to act. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. The next morning, I decided to confront him. I would tell him everything. The words felt heavy, like stones in my mouth, but they had to be spoken. I couldn't keep this secret any longer. As I got ready, my hands trembled. I couldn't stop thinking about how this conversation would change everything. Would he be angry? Would he deny it? Or worse, would he admit it with that calm, almost indifferent expression of his? I knew that once the words were out there would be no going back. It would change everything. I found him in the living room, sitting in his usual spot, drinking his coffee. He looked up when he saw me standing there, the test results in my hand. I didn't say anything at first. I just held the paper out to him, the words on the page glaring up at him. He took it, his brow furrowing as he looked down at the results. His face changed immediately. The color drained from his face, and his mouth tightened. I knew he saw it. He knew what I was holding. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was unbearable. Then finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper. This isn't what it looks like." His voice was shaky, almost pleading, but I wasn't ready to hear any excuses. I had already seen the truth, and there was no undoing it. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating, as I watched him try to compose himself. I didn't speak right away. I couldn't. I had to give myself a moment to steady my own breath, to fight the urge to crumble in front of him. He still had the paper in his hands, his fingers trembling slightly, as if he was afraid to look at it. The weight of the truth was sinking in, and I could see the realization in his eyes that this wasn't some mistake. This was real. I broke the silence first, my voice barely above a whisper, though I could feel the power of my words behind them. "How long, Mark?" His name felt foreign on my tongue, like it belonged to someone else, someone I didn't recognize. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and filled with a mixture of guilt and something else, something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just shame. It was something darker. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he began, the words stumbling out of his mouth, as if he was trying to piece together a lie that would somehow make this all go away. "It was a mistake, I swear. I never meant for any of this to." I cut him off before he could finish. "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice rising now, the anger bubbling up from somewhere deep inside me. "A mistake? You've been lying to me for years, Mark. For years. And now, you want me to believe this was a mistake?" His eyes shifted uncomfortably, and I could see the walls starting to crumble around him. For a moment, I thought he might try to deny it completely, but there was no point in pretending anymore. He knew I knew. He dropped the paper onto the coffee table between us, his hand running through his hair in frustration. I never wanted it to go this far. You don't understand. It was complicated. It wasn't just some fling. We didn't plan it. It just happened. It just happened. I repeated in disbelief, my chest tightening. That's your excuse? You slept with my sister-in-law, Mark, and now my daughter has to live with the consequences of your mistake? Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. I refused to cry in front of him. I would not give him that satisfaction. I had worked so hard to build this life, this family, and now it felt like it was all coming undone. All because of one betrayal, one man's weakness. I didn't mean for Emily to be caught in the middle of this, he said quietly, almost pleading. I didn't think it would affect anyone. I didn't want it to hurt her. Or you. You didn't want it to hurt me? I asked, my voice trembling now. Do you even hear yourself, Mark? It's already hurt me. This is the worst kind of betrayal. This isn't just about our marriage. This is about everything we built together. You've destroyed that. He stepped closer to me, his hand reaching out to touch my arm, but I jerked away instinctively, like his touch burned. His face fell, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I had loved, a man who had made the same vow as me to honor our commitment, to stay true. But that man was gone. The truth had wiped him away. I never wanted to hurt you, he whispered, his voice breaking. It was just one night, and it never meant anything. But Emily, she's my daughter too, I swear. I didn't know she was mine until now. I stepped back, shaking my head slowly, trying to process the weight of his words. You didn't know? You didn't know she was yours? Then what? You thought she was someone else's all these years? I didn't want to know, he said, his voice quiet, but the words felt like daggers. I couldn't bear to face the truth. I thought maybe if I ignored it, it would go away. I wanted to scream, to shout at him. How could he? How could he live with such a secret? How could he look me in the eyes every day, knowing what he had done, and pretend everything was fine? You ignored it? I repeated, my voice now a low guttural tone. You ignored your own daughter? And now you want me to just forgive you? He didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. The silence between us grew heavy, almost suffocating. His hands trembled, and I could see the guilt twisting his face into something unfamiliar. I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't stand to be in the same room with him. I turned away, walking towards the door, but not before I spoke the words I had been holding back for so long. You've destroyed everything, Mark. You've ruined this family. You've ruined me. And with that, I left. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, though I had no destination in mind. The road stretched before me, but it was as though I was trapped in a tunnel, unable to see anything clearly. All I could think about was Emily, my daughter. My heart broke for her. She had no idea what was going on. To her, the world was still safe, still full of love. But the truth was lurking beneath the surface, waiting to tear everything apart. I pulled into a parking lot by the lake, the familiar smell of wet grass and damp earth filling the air. It used to be a place where Mark and I would come when things felt too heavy. A place where we could sit and talk, without the weight of the world bearing down on us. Now, it felt like a place of judgment, as though the lake itself was watching me, waiting for me to make sense of everything. I sat there for what seemed like an eternity, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my eyes focused on nothing. I didn't know where to go from here. How could I go back home? How could I face him? How could I face myself after everything that had happened? I thought about the last few years, the good moments, the love we shared, the plans we made. I had believed in him, trusted him, loved him with everything I had. And now, everything felt like a lie. The foundation of my life had been cracked, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to piece it back together. My phone buzzed in the seat beside me, but I didn't bother to look. I already knew it was Mark. He had been calling, texting, leaving voicemail after voicemail, but I wasn't ready to talk to him. I wasn't ready to hear his apologies, his explanations. They meant nothing now. The damage had been done. Eventually, I decided to go home. I had to, for Emily. When I walked through the door, the house felt different. The air was thick, as if it had absorbed the tension from the past few hours. Mark was sitting in the living room, his face drawn and pale, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. He stood up as soon as he saw me, but I didn't move. I couldn't. Please, can we talk? He asked, his voice hoarse. I'm so sorry, I know I've hurt you. But you have to understand, it wasn't intentional. I never wanted this to happen. I never meant for it to go this far. I shook my head slowly, my hands trembling at my sides. You don't get it, do you? I asked, my voice soft but steady. It's not about intention anymore. It's about the fact that you did it. You betrayed me, Mark. You broke everything. You destroyed everything. He stepped closer, his hands outstretched as if he wanted to reach for me, but I stepped back instinctively. Please, just hear me out. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to understand that I didn't know what to do. I thought I could bury it, but now that Emily knows, I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, I said, my voice calm, though inside, I was falling apart. You can't fix this, because what you've done is unforgivable. I don't even know who you are anymore. The words hit harder than I had anticipated. I had spent years building this life with him, trusting him, believing in him. And now, I felt like I didn't even know the man standing before me. I looked over at Emily's room, the door slightly ajar. I could hear her soft breathing from across the hall. She was still asleep, still unaware of the storm that had consumed her parents. I felt a pang of guilt and sadness deep in my chest. She didn't deserve this. She deserved so much better than this mess we had created. Mark followed my gaze and sighed. I know she's innocent in all of this, but she has to know the truth, doesn't she? She has to know what's going on. I couldn't answer him right away. The thought of telling Emily the truth, of destroying the innocence she still had, was almost too much to bear. But what other choice did I have? How could I keep hiding it from her when it was so obvious now? No, I said softly, shaking my head. Not yet. She doesn't need to know right now. He nodded slowly, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. It wasn't what he wanted to hear, but I couldn't bring myself to shatter her world just yet. I wasn't ready to watch her face the truth. I took a deep breath and sat down on the couch, feeling the weight of everything settle in my bones. My head felt heavy, my heart even heavier. It was like I was carrying the world on my shoulders, and no matter how much I tried, I couldn't seem to shake the burden. For the first time in hours, there was silence between us, a quiet that stretched out longer than I ever thought possible. Finally, Mark spoke again, his voice low and steady. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I'll leave. If that's what you need, I'll go, and I won't come back until you're ready to talk. Just, please don't leave me. Please don't walk away from me. I looked at him, and for a moment, I saw the man I had married, the man I had loved, the man I thought I knew. But that man was gone. In his place was someone I didn't recognize, a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I don't know what I need right now, I whispered, but I know I can't live like this. Not anymore. Not with this hanging over us. The next few days were a blur. I was living in a fog, moving through life as if it wasn't really mine. I kept telling myself that I needed to be strong for Emily, for myself, but every time I looked at her, the weight of the truth came crashing down on me all over again. How was I supposed to protect her from this? How could I shield her from the reality of the world we were now living in? Mark had kept his distance, as I had asked. He didn't try to push me, didn't demand anything from me. He had given me space, but that only seemed to make things worse. The silence between us was suffocating. The absence of our usual conversations, our laughter, our quiet moments together, it all felt like a reminder of what had been lost. Emily, bless her heart, hadn't noticed anything yet. She went about her days like a normal 10-year-old, full of life and energy, unaware of the storm brewing in the background. But I knew the longer I kept this from her, the more I would have to answer for. How much longer could I shield her from the truth? And when I did tell her, how would she react? That was the hardest part, the not knowing. I had spent so many years building this life, this image of what family was supposed to be, and now it was all unraveling. Slowly, painfully. It was like watching a beautiful painting fade away, stroke by stroke, until all that was left was a canvas of brokenness. One morning, a week after the confrontation, I found myself standing in the hallway outside of Emily's room, listening to her softly hum as she got ready for school. I had been standing there for several minutes, caught between the need to keep pretending and the overwhelming urge to tell her everything. My hands were shaking, and my mind raced with all the things I wanted to say but didn't know how to say. Finally, she emerged, smiling brightly as she picked up her school bag. Her face lit up when she saw me standing there. "Good morning, Mom," she chirped, brushing past me with a kiss on the cheek. "What are we doing today?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight as I tried to mask the emotions that threatened to spill over. "Good morning, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile. "I just wanted to remind you that I'll be here when you get back from school. We'll talk later, okay?" Her smile faded for a moment, and she looked up at me with those big, trusting eyes. "Talk? About what?" I could feel the lump forming in my throat. The words were right there, just waiting to be said, but I couldn't bring myself to say them. "Not yet, just some things we need to discuss," I said, hoping she wouldn't press. Emily nodded, though she still looked at me with confusion in her eyes. She was old enough to sense when something was off, but young enough to think it was nothing more than a bad mood. I hated that I couldn't protect her from the storm that was coming, but I knew she would have to face it eventually. We all would. She left for school without asking more questions, and I sank into the couch, my mind racing. I was tired of pretending, tired of holding everything inside, but I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't tell her everything yet. I couldn't tear apart her innocence like that. When Mark came home that evening, he didn't immediately seek me out. Instead, he busied himself with his usual tasks, making dinner, tidying up the living room. It was as if he was waiting for me to make the first move, and I didn't know if I was ready to. But then, as the night wore on, I felt that same overwhelming sense of inevitability. I couldn't avoid it any longer. We had to face the truth, all of us. I couldn't keep hiding behind silence. When Emily finally came home, she greeted me with a quick hug, and then went to her room to drop off her bag. She came back downstairs a few minutes later, and I saw the look on her face. She was holding something in her hands, something small and rectangular. "Mom, I found this in the mailbox," she said, holding out an envelope. My heart stopped when I saw the return address. It was from the same lab that had done her DNA test. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. "Is everything okay?" Emily asked, sensing my reaction. I took the envelope from her, my fingers cold against the paper. There was no way I could open it right now, not with everything already falling apart. I couldn't face whatever more this might bring, but Emily's curiosity got the better of her. "Can I open it, Mom?" I hesitated, unsure. But then, without a word, I handed it to her. As she pulled the paper out, I saw her eyes widen slightly. She read the first few lines, then looked up at me, a confused expression on her face. "Mom, it says here that I'm not the biological child of." Her voice trailed off, and I could see the puzzle pieces slowly starting to fit together in her young mind. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. "Emily, we need to talk." She handed the paper back to me, her face pale, her usual warmth replaced by a cold confusion. "What is this? What's going on, Mom?" I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the hardest conversation I would ever have. I couldn't lie to her anymore. She deserved the truth, no matter how painful it was. But as I looked into her eyes, I knew that I wasn't just telling her about a betrayal. I was telling her that everything she had known about her family, about her world, was about to change forever. The weight of the moment felt unbearable. Emily stood there, looking at me with those wide eyes, her innocence hanging by a fragile thread. I wanted to reach out to her, to pull her close and shield her from the hurt that I knew was coming, but I knew that wasn't possible. This was her reality now. This was our reality. I sat down slowly, motioning for her to do the same. I didn't know where to begin, but I knew I couldn't delay the inevitable any longer. Mark had remained silent, standing in the doorway, watching us. His presence felt like a distant shadow, but I couldn't let that stop me. "Emily," I started, my voice trembling. I took a deep breath and tried to steady myself. "You know that we've always been a family, right? And we've always been honest with each other, or at least, I thought we had been." She nodded slowly, though she still didn't fully understand the weight of my words. "Well," I continued, "there's something I've been keeping from you. Something I should have told you earlier." Her brow furrowed, and she sat down on the edge of the couch, her small hands folded in her lap. I could see the confusion in her face, the fear starting to creep in. But she didn't speak. She just waited. I glanced at Mark briefly. He was standing by the door, his shoulders tense, his eyes filled with regret. He didn't move, didn't try to intervene. For once, he seemed smaller, helpless. "Sweetheart," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat, the DNA test that you did. It showed something I wasn't expecting, something that I wasn't ready to deal with. You're not biologically my daughter." The words were out before I even realized it, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. Emily blinked at me, her lips parting slightly as she processed what I had just said. "What do you mean?" "But, I don't understand." I could feel my heart breaking all over again. "It means that Mark, your father, well, the man you know as your father, he's not your biological father." I saw the color drain from her face. Her hand instinctively went to her mouth, her eyes widening in shock. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's not true." I nodded, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. "It's true, sweetie. I know this is hard to understand, but the truth is that." I looked at Mark, then back at Emily. "Your real father is. It's Mark's brother." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I could feel the weight of them pressing down on my chest, like a physical force. Emily blinked, her lips trembling as she looked at me for some kind of explanation, some kind of reassurance that everything would be okay. "Mark's brother?" she repeated, her voice full of disbelief. "Uncle Matt?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, honey, Uncle Matt." The silence that followed felt endless. I could hear Emily's soft breathing, but the room was suffocatingly quiet otherwise. I waited for her to say something, anything, but she didn't. She just stared at me, her face pale, her eyes wide with confusion and hurt. I don't understand," she said finally, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" My heart shattered as I watched her struggle to process the news. She had every right to be angry, to feel betrayed. I had failed her in the worst possible way. I had failed to protect her from this pain. "I didn't know how to," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know how to tell you something that would change everything. I didn't want to hurt you." Mark finally moved from the doorway, slowly walking toward us. He reached out, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder, but she flinched away from him, her eyes darting toward me, searching for answers that I couldn't give her. "I'm sorry, Mark said quietly. "I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you or your mom. This is the last thing I wanted, believe me." But Emily wasn't listening to him. She shook her head, her hands trembling as she wiped at her eyes. "No, you lied. You all lied. You knew and you didn't tell me. I thought you were my family, but you're not. You're all just lying to me." The words stung, each one landing like a slap to the face. I couldn't blame her. I had lied to her. I had kept this from her for so long, and now I had to watch her unravel the truth piece by piece. "I never meant to lie to you, Emily," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just didn't know how to tell you." She stood up abruptly, her face flushed with emotion. "I can't do this," she said, her voice thick with hurt. "I can't be here. I need to be alone." I wanted to reach out, to hold her, to tell her that it would all be okay. But I knew it wouldn't be. I knew that the world she had known was gone, and that I couldn't fix it with empty words or empty promises. Without another word, she ran up the stairs to her room, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, paralyzed, my body heavy with the weight of everything that had just happened. I could hear the muffled sobs coming from upstairs, and my heart ached for her. I wanted to take away her pain, but I knew I couldn't. This was something she had to process on her own, just like I had to process the betrayal, the guilt, the overwhelming loss. Mark sat down next to me on the couch, his face filled with regret, but I couldn't look at him. I couldn't bear to see the man who had torn my family apart. "Where do we go from here?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I shook my head slowly, tears finally spilling over. "I don't know, Mark. I don't know if we go anywhere. I don't know if we can fix this." The days that followed were nothing short of a nightmare. Emily withdrew into herself, spending more and more time in her room, her door always locked. I could hear the soft sounds of her crying late at night, but each time I tried to reach out, to comfort her, she pulled away. Her anger was palpable, and I could see it in her eyes, the distrust, the confusion, the overwhelming sense of betrayal. It was as though everything she had believed in was crumbling, and no matter how much I tried to hold her, the pieces slipped through my fingers. Mark and I, for the first time in years, didn't speak much. The house felt like a ghost town, each room echoing with the silence we had created. He didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to fix it. I couldn't even fix myself, let alone the mess we had made. But we were both stuck in this reality now. There was no going back. One afternoon, after I had spent the morning pacing the house in circles, trying to figure out what to do next, I received a call from my sister-in-law, Lisa. She had heard about the DNA test, of course. Word traveled fast. The family gossip had already begun. She asked if she could come by, if we could talk. I agreed, though the idea of facing anyone, especially Lisa, felt like more of a burden than I was ready to bear. But there was a part of me, a small, desperate part, that wanted someone to understand, someone who could make sense of it all. When Lisa arrived, I led her into the living room, where I sat on the couch, my hands folded tightly in my lap. She sat across from me, looking at me with that mix of sympathy and curiosity that people always wore when they had heard something they didn't understand. She was my sister-in-law, after all. She knew Mark and I had built a life together, a family, and I could see the concern in her eyes. I heard about everything, she said softly, her voice laced with empathy. I know this is hard, and I know you're angry, but you have to know that Mark never meant to hurt you like this. I could hear the words, but they didn't make any sense to me. Not anymore. I don't even know who he is anymore, I said quietly, my voice breaking. The man I married, he's not the same. He's a stranger now. He broke everything. He betrayed me in the worst possible way. Lisa shifted in her seat, her face softening. She wasn't here to take sides, but I could see that she wanted to fix it too. She didn't know how. None of us did. I know, she said, her voice heavy with understanding. But Mark didn't mean for any of this to happen. He was confused too. It was a mistake, a big one, but it wasn't intentional. You have to believe that. I looked at her, the anger in my chest flaring up once more. A mistake? I repeated, my voice shaking. A mistake? That's what this is. A mistake? He slept with his own brother's wife, and that's a mistake. Lisa's eyes widened, and I could see the guilt flicker across her face. No, I didn't mean it like that, she stammered. I just mean, it was a one-time thing. He didn't plan for any of this. And I know it doesn't excuse it, but I think you need to hear him out. You need to give him a chance to explain. I shook my head slowly, my chest tight. Explain? There's nothing to explain. The truth is right there. The DNA test doesn't lie. Lisa didn't respond right away. She looked down, her hands wringing together in her lap, as if trying to find the right words. Finally, she spoke again, her voice soft and careful. I know it's hard, she said, but you can't just throw away everything because of one mistake. You have to think about Emily. Think about how this is affecting her. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear anyone talk about Emily. The pain of knowing that she would carry this truth for the rest of her life, that she would have to live with the consequences of her father's betrayal, was too much. It was all I could do to hold myself together for her. I am thinking about her, I said, my voice rising slightly. Every second. But how am I supposed to look at her and pretend that everything is fine? How am I supposed to tell her that her world isn't broken? That the man she has called dad for her whole life, isn't he really her father? You want me to just pretend? Lisa's face softened. No, I don't want you to pretend. But I do think you need to decide what matters more, holding on to your anger, or finding a way to heal. Her words were a dagger to my heart. I didn't want to heal. I didn't want to forgive. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But as I looked at Lisa, I realized she was right about one thing. This wasn't just about Mark. It wasn't just about me. It was about Emily. If I didn't find a way to heal, to move forward, then I was only going to pass this hurt onto her. And I couldn't do that to her. I looked away from Lisa, my mind racing. What did healing even look like now? Was it possible to forgive? Was it possible to fix this broken thing? I had no answers. But I knew one thing: if I wanted to make it through this, I had to stop being consumed by my anger. For Emily's sake, if nothing else, I had to find a way to let go of the rage and the hurt. Can you give us a little time? I asked Lisa quietly, finally lifting my gaze to meet hers. I need time. I need space. I can't deal with everything right now. She nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. Of course, take all the time you need, but just remember, there's always a way back, even when it feels like everything is lost. She stood up to leave, but before she walked out the door, she turned to face me one last time. And if you need to talk, you know where to find me. As she left, I sat there in silence, the house still heavy with tension. Mark was nowhere to be found, and Emily was still upstairs, lost in her own world of hurt. I had no idea where we would go from here, but one thing was clear. This was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and painful, but if there was any hope for healing, it had to start with me. The days after Lisa left were filled with a kind of numbness, an ache that settled deep in my bones. Time passed slowly, like I was wading through mud, each step heavier than the last. Emily still wouldn't speak to me. Mark kept his distance, retreating into himself, a shadow of the man he once was. I knew he was waiting, hoping for a chance to explain himself, to apologize, to somehow make it right. But I didn't have the energy to listen. Not yet. There were moments when I would catch a glimpse of her, my sweet girl, walking past the hallway or sitting at the kitchen table with her headphones in, trying to block out the world. I hated seeing her like that. She was still so young, still so full of promise, and yet here she was, stuck in a reality that was no fault of her own. I could see the confusion in her eyes whenever she looked at me, the questions that burned in her mind, the hurt that had to be so much more overwhelming than I realized. How could I explain to her that the world she had known, the family she thought she belonged to, wasn't the truth? How could I make sense of a lie so big? I couldn't. I didn't have the answers. One evening, after I had finally managed to get Emily to sit down for dinner with me, though she barely ate anything, pushing the food around her plate, I decided to take a step forward. I couldn't keep avoiding the conversation with her. I couldn't protect her from the truth forever. She deserved to know that I was here for her, that I was still her mother, despite everything else. I sat across from her, my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to steady my shaking fingers. Emily looked up at me, her eyes puffy from crying, her expression unreadable. She had been so strong, and I could see the weight of everything bearing down on her. "Sweetheart," I began, my voice soft and careful. "I know this is all so confusing. I know you don't understand why this is happening. But I need you to know that it's not your fault. None of this is your fault." She didn't say anything, but I saw the tiniest movement, her shoulders dropping slightly, like the weight of my words was finally sinking in. She looked down at her plate, her fingers absently tracing the edge of the dish. "I know it feels like everything is falling apart," I continued, my voice wavering now. "And it feels like the people you trusted the most have let you down. But that's not the whole truth. We're still your family, Emily. You are still my daughter. No matter what, nothing can change that." Her eyes met mine then, and for the first time in days, I saw a flicker of something other than anger or sadness. It was doubt, but it was also a little bit of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I could help her heal. "I don't understand, Mom," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "How could you let this happen? How could you just let everything fall apart?" I sighed, my chest tightening. "I didn't let it happen, Emily. I never wanted this. I never thought this would be our reality. I wanted nothing more than to protect you from all of this. But the truth is, sometimes things happen that we don't expect. Things happen that we can't control, and we have to figure out how to move forward together." She was quiet again, her lips trembling as she tried to make sense of what I was saying. It was clear that the truth, the full truth, was something she wasn't ready to accept. But at least she was listening. At least she wasn't pulling away completely. "I don't know how to make it better," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to fix this, how to make the hurt go away. But I do know that I love you, Emily. I will always love you. And no matter what happens, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." She finally met my eyes, and for the first time in days, I saw a tear slip down her cheek. It was small, but it was enough to break me. I reached out for her hand, and she let me hold it, her fingers cold against mine. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I didn't mean to be so angry. I don't understand." "You don't have to understand right now," I said gently. "It's okay. We'll get through this together. I promise." We sat there for a while, not saying anything else. The silence between us wasn't as heavy as it had been before. It was still there, the weight of everything unsaid, but it was more bearable. And for the first time in days, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to rebuild. Later that night, I sat in the living room, my mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. Emily had gone to bed, and Mark was still absent. He hadn't tried to interrupt our conversation, hadn't come down to check on us. I wasn't sure where he was, maybe hiding away in his office, or maybe just giving us space. I couldn't care less, not at that moment. But even though Emily and I had taken a small step forward, I couldn't ignore the fact that this was far from over. The truth had only just begun to settle in, and I knew the real work had only just begun. We still had to face the fallout, the consequences of Mark's actions, the fractures in our family that would take years to heal if they could even be healed at all. Mark came into the living room later, as I expected. His eyes were red, his face haggard. He hadn't been sleeping. He hadn't been eating. Neither of us had. But the pain was still there, simmering just below the surface. "I know you're angry at me," he said quietly, standing in the doorway. "But I'll do anything, Emily. Anything to fix this." I looked at him, my heart full of conflicting emotions. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to tell him he didn't deserve a second chance. But deep down, I knew I couldn't just throw everything away. Not for him, not for me, but for Emily. She needed a family. She needed stability. And if there was any chance of us finding that again, we had to try. "I don't know where we go from here, Mark," I said softly, "but I can't do this alone. And I won't let Emily do this alone." Mark nodded slowly, stepping into the room. "We'll figure it out. I promise you. We'll make it right." But in my heart, I knew that making it right wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to happen overnight, and it wasn't going to be pretty. But maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance. A small one, a fragile one. And for Emily's sake, I had to hold on to that.